The Galactic Council chamber floated in the void between stars, a massive sphere of crystallized energy that hummed with the combined power of 17 civilizations. Ambassador Krixtar adjusted his ceremonial robes, his 6 eyes scanning the assembled delegates. The Vorthan representatives' scales shifted from purple to deep crimson, a sign of extreme distress that made every being in the chamber lean forward. "They're coming," the Vorthan wheezed through its breathing apparatus. "The Devourers have broken through the outer rim defenses. 3 systems gone, billions dead." A collective shudder ran through the chamber. The Devourers were the stuff of nightmares, a plague that swept through galaxies like cosmic locusts. They consumed everything: matter, energy, even the fabric of space itself. No weapon could stop them. No shield could hold them back. Every civilization that had faced them had fallen. "What of the Andromeda fleet?" asked the crystalline form of a Zenthran delegate. "Dissolved," the Vorthan replied, "along with the stars they were defending." Ambassador Krixtar felt his primary heart skip a beat. The Andromeda fleet had been their most powerful defense force, equipped with weapons that could shatter moons and shields that could withstand supernovas. "If they had fallen, there must be something we can do," insisted the aquatic representative from Hydros Prime. "Some weapon we haven't tried, some strategy. We have tried everything." The Vorthan scales now blazed white-hot with desperation. Antimatter bombs, singularity weapons, dimensional rifts, temporal loops. Nothing works. They adapt, they consume, they grow stronger. The chamber erupted in panicked voices, a cacophony of clicks, whistles, and subsonic rumbles as each species expressed their terror in their native tongue. Krixtar watched as centuries of diplomatic protocol crumbled in the face of extinction. Silence. The booming voice of the council elder, a being of pure energy that had witnessed the birth and death of 1,000 stars, cut through the chaos. "There is one option we have not considered." The chamber fell quiet. Every eye, sensor, and consciousness focused on the elder. "The humans," the elder said simply. A ripple of disbelief swept through the assembly. The Makari delegate actually laughed, a harsh barking sound. "The humans? Those primitive warmongers? They barely achieved faster-than-light travel a century ago. Their entire civilization could fit in one of our cargo holds." "The humans are violent," agreed the pacifist Etherian, its gossamer wings trembling. "They wage war against their own kind. They poison their home world. They are monsters." Krixtar remembered his one encounter with humans. It had been at a border dispute mediation 50 years ago. The human diplomat had seemed reasonable enough, but there had been something in those strange, forward-facing eyes, something that made his scales itch. Predator eyes. Eyes that had evolved to hunt, to kill. "Yes," the elder acknowledged. "They're monsters. And perhaps that is exactly what we need." "You cannot be serious," the Zenthran chimed, its crystalline form resonating with indignation. "We have spent millennia evolving beyond violence, achieving enlightenment, pursuing peace. And now you suggest we turn to the most violent species in known space." "I suggest," the elder said calmly, "that we are facing an enemy that does not respond to enlightenment or peace. The Devourers do not negotiate. They do not show mercy. They simply consume. Perhaps it takes a monster to fight a monster." The debate raged for hours. Some delegates stormed out in protest. Others wept at the thought of allying with humanity. The stories were well known, how humans had split the atom and used it to destroy their own cities, how they had created diseases as weapons, how they still resolved disputes with projectile weapons and explosive devices. But as reports continued to stream in another system gone, another fleet dissolved, another billion lives extinguished, the opposition gradually crumbled. "Even if we agreed," the Vorthan said finally, its scales now a dull gray of resignation, "why would the humans help us? We have shunned them, excluded them from the council, treated them as pariahs." The elder's energy form pulsed thoughtfully. "That is a risk we must take. Ambassador Krixtar, you have had dealings with humans before. I am assigning you to lead the diplomatic mission. Krigstar felt all 6 of his eyes widen in alarm. Elder, I'm not sure I am the right choice. The humans are unsettling. Precisely why you must go, the elder replied. You understand the danger they represent. You will not underestimate them. Take a small delegation. Travel to Earth. Plead our case. And pray to whatever powers you believe in that they agree to help. 3 days later, Krigstar stood on the bridge of the diplomatic vessel Harmony's Light, watching the blue marble of Earth grow larger in the view screen. Such a small world, he thought. So insignificant. Yet it had produced a species that made the entire galaxy nervous. Beside him, the other delegates shifted uneasily. There was Vexala from the Makari, her feathers ruffled with anxiety. Zenthorius represented the crystalline collective, his form dimmed to show respect. And, fluttering nervously, was Etherian Gentle Wind Through Stars, who had insisted on coming despite her species' pacifist nature. Receiving transmission from Earth Orbital Control, the communications officer announced. They're asking our intentions. Tell them we come in peace, Krigstar said, the irony not lost on him. Tell them we request an audience with their leadership on a matter of urgent importance. The response came quickly. Earth Control says you're cleared to dock at Station Alpha. A diplomatic team will meet you there. They also say, the officer paused, confusion evident. They say welcome to the neighborhood. The human space station was utilitarian, all hard angles and armor plating. No graceful curves or aesthetic considerations. Every surface was a weapon platform, every corridor a potential kill zone. It was a structure built by a species that expected attack at any moment. The airlock hissed open, and Krigstar got his first look at humans in 50 years. 3 of them stood waiting, 2 in military uniforms that bristled with barely concealed weapons, and 1 in a simple business suit. All 3 had those unsettling predator eyes. Ambassador Krigstar, the suited human said, stepping forward with hand extended. I'm Director Sarah Chun, Earth Diplomatic Corps. We've been expecting you. Krigstar carefully shook the offered hand, trying not to think about how those 5 fingers had evolved to grip weapons. You were expecting us? Chun smiled, and Krigstar suppressed a shudder at the sight of those omnivore teeth. We've been monitoring the situation with the Devourers. Figured it was only a matter of time before someone came knocking. Please follow me. The Security Council is waiting. They were led through stark corridors filled with humans in various uniforms. Military personnel who moved with predatory grace. Scientists whose eyes held a disturbing intensity. Workers who carried tools that could easily double as weapons. Every human they passed watched the alien delegation with those forward-facing eyes, assessing, calculating. The conference room was dominated by a massive holographic display showing the galaxy. Red dots marked systems consumed by the Devourers. The infection was spreading visibly, each refresh of the data showing new losses. Around the table sat a dozen humans, representing various nations and organizations. At the head was an older human with silver hair and eyes like chips of ice. I'm General Harrison, current rotating head of Earth Security Council, he said without preamble. We know why you're here. The question is, what are you offering in return for our help? Vexala ruffled her feathers indignantly. Offering? Your species faces the same extinction as ours. Surely self-preservation. The Devourers are currently 3,000 light-years from Earth, Chun interrupted smoothly. At their current rate of expansion, we have approximately 70 years before they reach human space. 70 years to prepare, to develop new weapons, to maybe find another solution. You're asking us to put our entire species at risk now, instead of later. So yes, Ambassador, we're asking what you're offering. Krigstar felt his scales shift color despite his best efforts to control them. These humans were even more calculating than he'd feared. They spoke of extinction as if it were a business negotiation. Full membership in the Galactic Council, he said. Access to all our technology. Trade rights. Cultural exchange. Everything your species has been denied. The humans exchanged glances. General Harrison leaned back in his chair. And if we defeat the Devourers, what then? Do we go back to being the galaxy's pariahs? The monsters you warn your children about? No. Therian Wind spoke for the first time, her melodious voice filling the room. If you save us, you will be honored as heroes. Heroes, Chin repeated, her tone unreadable. The same species you've called warmongers and primitives for a century. Suddenly, we're heroes because you need us. The meeting continued for hours. The humans asked detailed questions about the Devourers, their composition, behavior, weaknesses. They wanted access to all battlefield data, all failed weapon specifications, all tactical analyses. They spoke of war with a familiarity that made the alien delegates increasingly uncomfortable. Finally, General Harrison stood. We need to discuss this among ourselves. You'll have our answer in 24 hours. Chin will show you to your quarters. As they were led to their assigned rooms, Vexala whispered to Krixtar, they're going to refuse. I can see it in their eyes. They're going to let us all die while they prepare their own defenses. But Krixtar wasn't so sure. He had seen something else in those predator eyes. Not fear or indifference, but something far more dangerous. Anticipation. That night, unable to rest, Krixtar accessed the station's public information network. What he found chilled him to his core. The humans hadn't been idle during their century of isolation. They had been preparing. The database was filled with military innovations, each more terrifying than the last. Kinetic bombardment systems that could crack continents. Bioweapons that could rewrite DNA on the fly. Nanoswarms that could disassemble matter at the molecular level. And something called Project Prometheus that was so classified, even its existence was barely acknowledged. But it wasn't just the weapons that disturbed him. It was the philosophy behind them. Document after document spoke of something called total war doctrine, the complete mobilization of a species for conflict. The humans didn't just prepare their military for war. They prepared their entire civilization. Every citizen was a potential soldier. Every scientist, a weapons designer. Every factory, a munitions plant. Every ship, a potential warship. It was a level of militarization that the peaceful species of the galaxy had abandoned millions of years ago. A soft chime indicated someone at his door. He opened it to find Director Chun, now dressed in casual clothes, but somehow looking no less dangerous. Can't sleep? She asked. Me neither. Thought you might like to see something. Against his better judgment, Krixtar followed her to an observation deck. Earth hung below them, blue and white and deceptively peaceful. Beautiful, isn't it? Chin said. You know what I see when I look at it? I see a species that's been preparing for this moment our entire existence. We've always known something was out there. Something dangerous. While your civilizations evolved past conflict, we embraced it, refined it, perfected it. You speak of war as if it were an art form, Krixtar said. To us, it is, Chin replied simply. It's what we're good at. Maybe the only thing we're truly good at. Your species evolved beyond violence because you could. Ours evolved through violence because we had to. Every advancement, every innovation, every step forward came because we were fighting something. Disease, starvation, each other, the environment itself. Conflict isn't our last resort. It's our first instinct. And the Devourers? Chin smiled, and this time Krixtar saw what he had missed before. Not anticipation. Hunger. The hunger of a predator presented with the ultimate prey. The Devourers are a problem, she said. And humans? We're very good at solving problems. Permanently. She left him there, staring at Earth, and wondering if they had made a terrible mistake. The Devourers were monsters that would consume the galaxy. But the humans were monsters that had been waiting their entire existence for a worthy opponent. The next morning, the delegation was summoned back to the conference room. General Harrison stood at the head of the table, his expression unreadable. The other human leaders sat with similar poker faces, giving nothing away. We've made our decision, Harrison announced. Earth will assist in fighting the Devourers. Relief flooded through Krixtar, his scales brightening. Vexala actually chirped with joy. Even Stoics and Thorius pulsed with positive energy. However, Harrison continued, and The room grew cold. "We have conditions." "Name them," Krixtar said quickly. "Whatever you want. First, full military autonomy. Human forces will cooperate with Galactic Council fleets, but we maintain independent command structure. No alien oversight of human military operations." Reasonable enough, Krixtar thought. Agreed. Second, access to all Devourer tissue samples, energy signatures, and any capture technology. We need to understand our enemy. Of course. Third, the right to develop and deploy weapons without council approval or oversight. Some of what we're planning, your civilizations might find disturbing. Krixtar hesitated. The Galactic Council had banned countless weapon types over the millennia, devices deemed too cruel, too destructive, too dangerous to exist. But what choice did they have? Agreed, he said. Fourth, when this is over, humanity gets a permanent seat on the Galactic Council with full voting rights and veto power. The alien delegates exchanged glances. Veto power was reserved for founding species. But again, what choice did they have? "I will recommend it to the Council," Krixtar said. "I believe they will agree." And fifth, Harrison said, his ice chip eyes boring into Krixtar, "When we defeat the Devourers, and we will defeat them, the galaxy acknowledges what we are. No more pretending humans are something we're not. We are a warrior species. We are violent. We are, as you so often said, monsters. But we are monsters now. And you'd better hope we're monstrous enough." The terms were harsh, but Krixtar had expected nothing less. "I agree to your terms, General. When can you begin mobilization?" Harrison smiled, and it was the smile of a predator scenting blood. "Ambassador, we began mobilization the moment your ship entered our system. Earth's entire industrial base is already converting to war production. Reserve forces are being called up. Science teams are working on new weapon systems. We'll have advanced fleets ready to deploy within a week." "A week?" Zenthorius chimed in disbelief. "Our species take months to prepare for major military operations." "That's because your species prepare for war," Chen explained. "Humans live in a constant state of readiness for it. We don't have to prepare. We just have to stop pretending we're not already prepared." As the delegation prepared to leave, Krixtar found himself alone with General Harrison for a moment. "Tell me honestly, General," he said, "can you really defeat them? The Devourers have consumed thousands of civilizations. What makes humans different?" Harrison was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft but carried the weight of absolute certainty. Every species in the galaxy evolved past the need for violence. They developed technology and philosophy and art. They reached for the stars with open hands. But humans? We reached for the stars with clenched fists. We didn't explore space. We conquered it. We didn't develop technology to improve life. We developed it to end life more efficiently. Your species spent millions of years learning how not to be monsters. We spent our entire existence learning how to be better monsters. He turned to look out at the stars, where somewhere in the darkness, the Devourers were feeding. You want to know what makes us different? It's simple. The Devourers consume because it's their nature. They can't help what they are. But humans? We choose to be monsters. We refined it. We perfected it. We made it a science, and an art, and a philosophy. And now, finally, we have a target worthy of everything we've become. Krixtar left Earth orbit with his delegation, carrying humanity's promise of aid back to the Galactic Council. Behind them, the small blue world erupted with activity. Ships launched from hidden bases. Factories that had produced consumer goods retooled for weapons production. Scientists who had studied medicine turned their knowledge to more destructive purposes. The monsters had been asked for help, and they had answered. But as Krixtar watched Earth shrink in the distance, he wondered if they had traded one extinction for another. The Devourers would consume their bodies. But what would humanity consume? Their souls? Their principles? Their very identity as peaceful beings? Only time would tell. But one thing was certain. The galaxy would never be the same. The first human fleet arrived at the Calarian system 3 weeks after the agreement. Admiral Jessica Thompson stood on the bridge of the UES Vengeance, watching the tactical display with the calm of someone who had spent their entire life preparing for this moment. Around her, the bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency, their movements precise and economical. "Ma'am, we're receiving a transmission from the Galactic Council fleet," her communications officer reported. "Admiral Zek Theta is requesting immediate conference." On screen, Thompson ordered. The main display shifted to show the insectoid features of Admiral Zek Theta, Supreme Commander of the Combined Council Forces. His multifaceted eyes glittered with what Thompson recognized as barely concealed panic. "Admiral Thompson," Zek Theta's translator rendered his clicking speech into English. "Your arrival is timely. We've lost contact with 3 scout squadrons in the past hour. The Devourers are less than 2 light years from this position." "Understood," Thompson replied. "What's your current tactical disposition?" The display changed to show the Council fleet. Nearly 3,000 vessels arranged in a perfect defensive sphere. It was a formation that had served the peaceful species well for millennia, designed to present no weak points, no aggressive posture. Thompson had to suppress a sigh. "Admiral Zek Theta, I recommend you pull your forces back to these coordinates," she said, highlighting a position further from the approaching threat. "We'll need room to work." "Retreat." Zek Theta's wings buzzed in agitation. "Admiral Thompson, we cannot simply abandon this system. There are 12 billion sentients on Calarian Prime. I'm not suggesting we abandon it," Thompson said patiently. "I'm suggesting we need maneuvering room. Trust me, Admiral. We're about to show you how humans wage war." The next several hours were a whirlwind of activity. Human ships continued to arrive, not the graceful, artistic vessels of the Council races, but brutal instruments of destruction. The Dreadnought extinction event, bristling with weapons that violated 17 different Council treaties. The carrier swarm of the Locust Fleet, each ship designed to deploy thousands of autonomous hunter-killer drones. The stealth cruisers of Silent Death Squadron, their hulls coated in materials that bent space-time itself to avoid detection. In the Council Fleet Command Center, Ambassador Krixtar watched the human preparations with growing unease. He had been assigned as liaison between the two forces, a job that was proving more disturbing by the hour. "They're deploying mines," Vexalis said, her feathers standing on end. "Millions of them. Don't they realize the Devourers will simply consume them?" "I don't think they expect the mines to stop them," Krixtar replied, studying the pattern. "Look at the deployment grid. They're not creating a barrier. They're creating— I'm not sure what they're creating." On the human flagship, Thompson was explaining exactly what they were creating to her senior staff. "The Devourers consume everything they touch," she said, manipulating the holographic display. "But consumption takes time. Even for them, there's a process. Our intelligence suggests it takes them approximately 0.003 seconds to break down and absorb simple matter. Complex matter takes longer. And exotic matter." She smiled, and her officers leaned forward. "The mines aren't just explosives. Each one contains a cocktail of the nastiest stuff our scientists could dream up. Strangelets, micro black holes, temporal distortion fields, false vacuum bubbles. We can't stop the Devourers from consuming them, but we can give them the mother of all cases of indigestion." Commander Chun, no relation to the director, despite the shared surname, raised his hand. "Ma'am, what about the planet? Some of those weapons could cause collateral damage." "The planet is dead if we lose," Thompson said flatly. "But if any of you have moral qualms about what we're about to do, speak now. I'll transfer you back to Earth with no black marks on your record." Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. These were humans who had volunteered for this mission, knowing exactly what it would entail. "Good," Thompson nodded. "Now let's talk about Phase 2. The Devourers adapt to weapons quickly, so we're not going to use the same weapon twice. Martinez, what's the status on the bioweapon program?" Dr. Elena Martinez, head of the Military Science Division, pulled up her own display. "We've developed 17 different strains, each targeting a different aspect of their consumption mechanism. The beauty is Each strain is designed to mutate when it encounters their adaptation process. They literally can't adapt fast enough. Chemical weapons? Thompson asked. 32 varieties ready for deployment. Everything from molecular acid that targets their binding proteins to synthetic compounds that cause uncontrolled energy release when consumed. Physical weapons? This is where it gets fun, weapons specialist Colonel Jack Murphy said with obvious relish. Kinetic strikes, particle beams, gravity hammers, antimatter charges, and, my personal favorite, the recursive fragmentation rounds. Each bullet splits into 1,000 smaller bullets on impact. Each of those splits into 1,000 more, and so on. Give the bastards a trillion things to consume at once. And Project Prometheus? Thompson asked quietly. The room fell silent. Even among this group of hardened warriors, Project Prometheus was spoken of in hushed tones. Ready for deployment? Murphy confirmed. God help us all. The first contact came 18 hours later. The Devourers appeared at the edge of the system like a cancer spreading through space itself. They didn't arrive in ships. They were more like a living nebula, a cloud of interconnected entities that flowed through the void, consuming everything in their path. Stars dimmed as they passed. Planets crumbled to dust. Space itself seemed to warp and writhe in their presence. On the Council Fleet command ship, alarms blared as sensor operators called out readings that made no sense. Energy signatures off the scale. Mass readings are impossible. They're everywhere and nowhere. They're moving faster than light without entering hyperspace. Admiral Zek Theta stood frozen, his compound eyes reflecting the horror on the main screen. By the first stars, he whispered, how do we fight that? You don't. Admiral Thompson's voice came through the comm system. We do. All Council forces fall back to secondary positions. You're about to see why humans are the monsters of the galaxy. The first wave of Devourers hit the minefield. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. The entities simply flowed over the mines, consuming them as they consumed everything else. Then, the exotic matter payloads activated. Space screamed. Reality twisted as micro-black holes formed and collapsed. Temporal distortions created pockets where time moved backwards, causing the Devourers to unconsume what they had just eaten, only to consume it again in an endless loop. Strange matter spread like an infection, converting normal matter into more strange matter, forcing the Devourers to expend energy to maintain their cohesion. It's working, someone in the Council Fleet shouted. They're slowing down. But Thompson knew better. This was just the appetizer. All ships implement attack pattern Omega. Fire at will. What followed was controlled chaos. Human ships didn't fight in formation like the Council fleets. They fought like pack predators, each ship or squadron operating independently, but with a shared purpose. Destroyers dove into the heart of the Devourer mass, firing everything they had before pulling out at the last second. Carriers released their drone swarms, millions of AI-controlled weapons that attack from every angle at once. Stealth ships appeared behind Devourer concentrations, delivered their payloads, and vanished before retaliation could come. The bioweapons were deployed via specialized missiles that penetrated deep into Devourer formations before releasing their cargo. The entities that consumed the pathogens began to behave erratically, their consumption becoming uncontrolled, turning on their own kind. Chemical weapons created dead zones where the very fabric of space became toxic to the Devourers. Kinetic weapons pounded them with relentless force, each impact creating shockwaves that disrupted their cohesion. But the Devourers adapted. They always adapted. Within an hour, they had developed immunity to the first generation of bioweapons. The chemical compounds that had been toxic were now being absorbed harmlessly. Even the exotic matter weapons were becoming less effective as they learned to consume them more efficiently. Admiral, they're accelerating again, Thompson's tactical officer reported. They'll reach Calarian Prime in 6 hours at this rate. Thompson nodded. She had expected this. Hope for it, even. Signal all ships. Implement Phase 3. Release the beast. In the Council Command Center, Krigstar watched the tactical display with growing alarm. What's Phase 3? What beast? His question was answered as every human ship suddenly pulled back, creating a clear corridor between the Devourers and the planet. For a moment, it looked like retreat. Then, space itself seemed to ripple. A new ship emerged from hyperspace. No, not a ship. It was too large to be a ship. It was the size of a small moon, a sphere of metal and energy that radiated malevolence. What in the name of... Admiral Zek Theta couldn't finish the sentence. That Thompson's voice came through the comm is the UES Nemesis. Humanity's answer to the ultimate question. How do you kill something that can't be killed? You create something worse. The Nemesis began to change. Its spherical form split open like a flower blooming, revealing layer after layer of weapon systems. But these weren't conventional weapons. At the ship's heart was something that made even hardened human officers uncomfortable, a captured singularity, held in check by technology stolen from a dozen extinct civilizations and improved by human ingenuity. You're insane, Zek Theta breathed. A weaponized black hole? Do you have any idea what could go wrong? Everything, Thompson admitted. That's what makes it beautiful. The Nemesis fired. It wasn't a beam or a projectile. It was a distortion in space-time itself, a wave of pure gravitational force that swept toward the Devourers. When it hit them, the results were immediate and horrifying. The entities weren't just destroyed, they were unraveled, their very existence torn apart at the fundamental level. They tried to consume the weapon, but how do you consume gravity itself? How do you devour the absence of space? The Devourers reeled back, their advance halted for the first time in recorded history. But Thompson knew this was temporary. They would adapt. They always adapted. All ships implement saturation protocol. Hit them with everything. Don't give them time to think. What followed was the most intense bombardment in human military history. Every weapon, every tactic, every dirty trick humanity had developed over millennia of warfare was unleashed at once. Ships fired weapons that had been banned by human governments, let alone alien ones. Biological agents that could rewrite matter at the quantum level. Chemical compounds that existed in 17 dimensions at once. Kinetic weapons that ignored the laws of physics through sheer bloody-mindedness. And, through it all, the Nemesis continued its gravitational assault, each wave tearing larger chunks from the Devourer mass. But the cost was becoming apparent. Human ships were falling. The destroyer Ruthless was consumed when it got too close. The carrier Pride of Mars lost half its hull to a Devourer tendril that adapted mid-attack. The stealth cruiser Shadow Walker simply vanished, its fate unknown. Admiral, Thompson's first officer said quietly, "We're down to 73% combat effectiveness. Ammunition reserves at 41%. The Nemesis is showing stress fractures from maintaining the singularity." Thompson studied the display. The Devourers had been hurt badly. Their mass was less than half what it had been, but they were still coming, still adapting, still consuming. "Signal the fleet," she ordered. "Prepare for final protocol." "Admiral," her first officer's voice was carefully neutral. "Final protocol requires authorization from—" "I know what it requires." Thompson cut him off. She reached into her uniform and pulled out a small device. Her finger hovered over the activation switch. "Signal Ambassador Krigstar. He needs to see this." When Krigstar's image appeared on the screen, Thompson could see the fear in his alien features. Behind him, the Council Fleet Command Center was in chaos. "Admiral Thompson," he said, "the Devourers are adapting to everything. We need to retreat, regroup?" "No," Thompson said simply. "We need to end this. Ambassador, I'm about to show you why the galaxy was right to fear humans. Why we're the monsters you always said we were. I'm about to activate Project Prometheus." "What is Project Prometheus?" Krigstar asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know. Thompson's smile was sad. "It's our final solution. You see, Ambassador, every species in the galaxy evolved past the need for mutual assured destruction. You developed weapons powerful enough to destroy worlds. Then, had the wisdom not to use them. But humans? We developed weapons powerful enough to destroy everything. And then we developed worse ones. Project Prometheus is our worst one. She pressed the button. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, every human ship in the fleet began broadcasting a signal. Not radio or subspace, but something else. Something that made reality itself shudder. You know what the Devourers consume, don't you? Thompson asked conversationally. Matter, energy, space, time, everything that exists. But what if something existed that shouldn't? What if we created a paradox so fundamental that reality itself rejected it? The signal reached its crescendo, and space began to tear. Not a clean rip like a hyperspace window, but a ragged wound that bled impossibilities. And from that wound came things. They weren't ships. They weren't creatures. They were contradictions given form. Weapons that existed in the past and future, but not the present. Entities that were alive and dead simultaneously. Matter that had negative existence, less than nothing, an absence so profound it had physical weight. The Devourers tried to consume them and screamed, a sound that resonated through subspace and made every telepath in 3 systems clutch their heads in agony. How do you consume something that doesn't exist? How do you devour a paradox? The impossible weapons tore through the Devourer mass like paper. Where they touched, reality simply gave up. The Devourers didn't die. They ceased. Not just in the present, but retroactively. They unhappened. Their existence erased backwards through time. But the cost was visible. Where the paradox weapons passed, space itself was wounded. Stars flickered between existing and not. Planets phased in and out of reality. The very laws of physics whimpered. You're destroying everything. Zektheta's voice came through the comm, high with hysteria. This is madness. This is human warfare, Thompson corrected. We don't just defeat our enemies. We make them never have existed in the first place. The battle, if it could still be called that, lasted another hour. By the end, the Devourers were gone. Not defeated, not driven off, but erased. The only evidence they had ever existed was the path of destruction they had carved through the galaxy. And even that was beginning to fade as the paradox weapons rewrote history. Finally, mercifully, Thompson gave the order to cease fire. The paradox weapons vanished back into their impossible non-existence. The wound in reality began to heal. Those scientists would later determine it left a scar that would last until the heat death of the universe. In the sudden silence that followed, Thompson opened a channel to the entire combined fleet. The Devourers are gone, she announced. Not defeated. Gone. Erased from existence itself. This is what humanity brings to the galaxy. This is what we are. We are not builders or explorers or artists. We are destroyers. We are the species that looked at the fundamental laws of reality and asked, how can we weaponize this? We are the monsters you always knew we were. She paused, letting that sink in. But we are monsters now. And as long as Earth stands, nothing, and I mean nothing, will threaten this galaxy again. Because we'll do worse to them than they could ever do to you. We'll make them never have existed at all. The channel closed, leaving thousands of alien minds to grapple with what they had just witnessed. The Devourers, the unstoppable plague that had consumed countless civilizations, were gone. Humanity had done the impossible. But at what cost? On the Council command ship, Ambassador Krixtar stared at the tactical display, showing the scars in space where reality had been wounded. The Devourers were gone, yes. But in their place stood something perhaps even more terrifying, a species that could, and would break the fundamental laws of existence to win a war. They saved us, Vexala whispered, her feathers trembling. But what have we unleashed? Krixtar didn't answer. He couldn't. He was too busy watching the human fleet regroup with mechanical precision, already preparing for the next threat. Because there'd be a next threat. There always was. And when it came, the monsters would be ready. 6 months after the Devourer War, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session. The chamber that had once hummed with peaceful discourse now crackled with tension. Ambassador Krixtar took his position, noting how the other delegates unconsciously moved away from the new human section. The humans had claimed their seat with typical efficiency. Ambassador Sarah Chun sat with perfect poise, flanked by General Harrison and Admiral Thompson. They wore simple black uniforms devoid of ornamentation, a stark contrast to the elaborate ceremonial garb of the other species. Yet somehow, their simplicity made them more intimidating. "This emergency session is called to order," the elder intoned, its energy form flickering with what Krixtar had learned to recognize as anxiety. "We are here to address the situation that has developed since humanity's intervention against the Devourers." Situation? The Makari delegates' feathers bristled. "Is that what we're calling it?" 17 systems are reporting space-time anomalies. 3 species have reported mass hysteria from exposure to paradox radiation. The Etherians can't even enter the former battle zones without their consciousness fragmenting. "The Devourers are gone," Chin said calmly. "The galaxy is safe." "Safe," Zenthorius chimed, his crystalline form resonating with distress. "You've torn holes in reality itself. Our scientists predict those scars will take millions of years to heal. Some may never heal." Admiral Thompson leaned forward slightly. "Would you prefer the Devourers had reached your worlds? I can show you projections of how long your civilization would have lasted. Spoiler alert, it's measured in hours." "We're grateful," the Vorthan delegate interjected quickly, scales shifting to a placating blue. "Truly, but the level of force used, the weapons deployed, they go beyond anything the Council has ever sanctioned." "The Council's sanctions didn't stop the Devourers," General Harrison observed. "Our weapons did." The debate raged for hours. Some species called for humanity to be censured, their weapons banned. Others, particularly those whose worlds have been directly saved, argued for giving humans even more authority. The chamber divided into factions, something that hadn't happened in millennia. Finally, the elder called for silence. "Ambassador Chun, the Council needs assurances. Humanity has demonstrated capabilities that frankly terrify us. How can we trust you won't turn these weapons on Council members?" Chun stood, and the chamber fell silent. There was something about humans that commanded attention, a predator's presence that millions of years of evolution couldn't overcome. "You want to know if you can trust the monsters you've awakened," she said. "The answer is no. You can't. You can never fully trust us, because we are exactly what you've always said we were. We are violent. We are destructive. We are everything your species evolved beyond." Gasps and murmurs filled the chamber, but Chun continued. "But here's what you're missing. We choose our targets. For all our violence, for all our monstrosity, humans have one trait you seem to have forgotten in your fear. We protect our own. And, like it or not, you're ours now." "Ours?" The Makari delegate's voice rose. "We are not possessions." "No," Chun agreed. "You're family. Dysfunctional, annoying family that we didn't choose, and who certainly didn't choose us. But family nonetheless. And humans? We do terrible things to protect our family." She gestured to the holographic display showing the galaxy. "You think we developed these weapons just for the Devourers? We've been developing them our entire existence. First to use against each other, because we're monsters, remember? Then to use against whatever we found in the dark, because we always knew something was out there, something worse than us. And if you become that something," the elder asked quietly. Chin's smile was sharp. "Then, you better hope we taught someone else to be monsters too." The vote was close, but humanity retained their council seat. The restrictions on their weapons were lifted, not because the council approved, but because they recognized the futility of trying to contain human ingenuity. Better to have the monsters inside the tent looking out than outside looking in. In the months that followed, humanity integrated into galactic society in their own unique way. They didn't build beautiful ships or create transcendent art. They built defense platforms around vulnerable worlds. They established rapid response fleets in every sector. They turned the peaceful galactic navy into something that could actually fight. And they taught. Not all species were comfortable with it, but some recognized the necessity. The Vorthen, their scales now permanently marked with the memory of near extinction, were the first to request human military advisors. The Calarians, whose world had nearly been consumed, asked for help building their own defense forces. "You're corrupting them," Etherian Gentle Wind accused Krixtar during a break in council proceedings. They were peaceful species. Now, they speak of weapons and tactics. They speak of survival, Krixtar corrected. The humans showed us a truth we had forgotten. The universe doesn't care about our enlightenment. It doesn't respect our philosophy. There are things in the dark that will destroy us simply because that's what they do. And sometimes the only answer to a monster is a bigger monster. But the changes went deeper than military doctrine. Human concepts began seeping into galactic culture. Competition, which had been viewed as primitive, was reframed as motivation for improvement. Conflict, once seen as failure of diplomacy, was recognized as sometimes inevitable. The idea that peace was not a natural state, but something that had to be actively defended took root. Not everyone approved. The Etherians withdrew from several sectors, unable to reconcile their pacifist nature with the new reality. Some species spoke of forming a separate council, one without human influence. But when pirates began raiding their shipping lanes, pirates who had grown bold knowing the old council wouldn't pursue them into unclaimed space, it was human patrol ships that responded. The pirates were never seen again. When asked what happened to them, Admiral Thompson had simply said they chose to be predators. They met apex predators. A year after the Devourer War, Krixtar found himself on Earth. He had been invited to observe human military training, part of the Council's effort to understand their new protectors. What he saw disturbed and fascinated him in equal measure. The training wasn't just about weapons and tactics. It was about mindset. Human recruits were taught to embrace control violence, to channel their aggression into purpose. They learned not just how to fight, but when and why. Most surprisingly, they learned when not to fight. "You seem surprised," Director Chen observed, joining him on the observation deck overlooking a training field. "I expected more brutality," Krixtar admitted. "This is almost philosophical. The most dangerous warriors aren't the ones who love violence," Chen explained. "They're the ones who understand it, who can turn it on and off like a switch, who can be utterly ruthless when needed and completely peaceful when not." On the field below, recruits practiced what humans call de-escalation techniques alongside combat training, learning to offer mercy with one hand while keeping the other on their weapon. "Is that what humanity is?" Krixtar asked. "A species that can switch between monster and protector at will? That's what we try to be," Chen said. "Sometimes we fail. Sometimes the monster wins. But mostly we choose to be the guardians. Because the alternative is becoming the very thing we guard against." The conversation was interrupted by an urgent message. Chen's expression hardened as she read it. "Ambassador, we need to get you to the council immediately. There's been an incident." The incident turned out to be first contact with a new species. But this wasn't a peaceful encounter. The Skarathi had announced themselves by destroying a research station and demanding the council's immediate surrender. Their technology was advanced, their weapons powerful, and their attitude uncompromising. Submit or be destroyed. The emergency council session was pandemonium. Some delegates called for negotiation, others for appeasement. The trauma of the Devourer War had left many species gun-shy, afraid of another conflict that might tear reality apart. "They've given us 3 days to respond," the Elder announced. "Their fleet is already moving toward council space." "How many ships?" General Harrison asked. 400, each one equivalent to our heaviest dreadnoughts. "Weapons, plasma cannons, antimatter torpedoes, some kind of phasing technology we don't fully understand." Harrison nodded thoughtfully. "Decent. Not Devourer-level threat, but respectable." "Admiral Thompson, what's your assessment?" Thompson pulled up tactical displays. "Straightforward conquest fleet. No exotic weapons, no reality-breaking technology. Just good old-fashioned military might. They're bullies who've never faced real opposition. You're talking about them like they're nothing, the Makari delegate protested. 400 ships. The Council Navy has less than half that. The Council Navy, yes, Thompson agreed. But you have us now, and we've been busy. She changed the display to show human fleet positions. The alien delegates stared in shock. In the years since the Devourer War, humanity hadn't been idle. They had built shipyards that operated around the clock, training facilities that produced crews by the thousands, a military-industrial complex that made their old, earthbound one look quaint. You've been preparing for another war, the Etherian accused. We've been preparing for the next threat, Harrison corrected. Because there's always a next threat. That's the lesson you never learned in your millions of years of peace. The universe is not peaceful. It's full of predators. And the only way to stop a predator is to be a better predator. What do you propose? The elder asked, though its tone suggested it already knew. Let us handle this, Chin said. No reality-breaking weapons. No paradox generators. Just conventional warfare, human style. We'll show the Skarathi why the galaxy's monsters now work for the good guys. The vote was unanimous, even the pacifist Etherians abstaining rather than opposing. The trauma of near extinction overrode philosophical objections. 2 days later, the Skarathi fleet arrived at the designated coordinates, expecting to accept the Council's surrender. Instead, they found a single human ship. The UES Diplomatic Solution, a name that would have been funny if it wasn't mounted on a vessel that bristled with enough firepower to crack a moon. The Skarathi commander appeared on the view screen, a reptilian creature with 4 arms and an attitude that suggested it had never lost a fight. You dare send one ship to meet us? It snarled. The Council insults us. Admiral Thompson appeared on the screen, calm and collected. The Council didn't send us. We volunteered. I'm Admiral Thompson, representing humanity. We're here to offer you a choice. We don't negotiate with prey species. Oh, we're not prey, Thompson said, her smile showing teeth. We're persistence hunters. Do you know what that means? It means we don't chase you down. We just follow. Slowly, relentlessly, until you're exhausted, until you make a mistake, until you realize that no matter how far you run, we're still coming. Enough talk. The Skarathi commander gestured to its crew. Destroy this arrogant. The transmission cut off as the diplomatic solution vanished. Not into hyperspace, but using one of humanity's newer innovations. A phase cloak that shifted the ship slightly out of sync with reality. Invisible, intangible, but very much present. The Skarathi weapons fired at empty space. Then, their ships began exploding. It wasn't dramatic. No massive beams or exotic weapons. Just precision strikes from weapons that materialized out of nowhere. Antimatter charges placed directly against hull plating. Nanite swarms that dismantled shield generators from inside. Computer viruses that turned their own weapons against them. Where are they? The Skarathi commander screamed. How are they doing this? The answer came as hundreds of human ships dropped out of hyperspace, surrounding the Skarathi fleet. But it didn't attack. They just waited. Thompson's voice echoed across all channels. You have 2 choices. Surrender now and become a client species of the Galactic Council, subject to our protection and our rules. Or keep fighting and discover why humanity earned the title of monsters. Some Skarathi ships tried to run. Interdiction fields stopped them. Others fired wildly. Their shots were either dodged or absorbed by shields that operated on principles the Skarathi couldn't understand. This is impossible, the commander raged. We are the Skarathi Empire. We have conquered 50 species. 50 species who never learned to be monsters, Thompson replied. We conquered ourselves over and over for thousands of years. We turned war into science, art, and philosophy. You're not an empire. You're practice. The battle lasted 6 hours. At the end, the Skarathi fleet was disabled, not destroyed. Their crews were alive, their ships salvageable. It was a message more powerful than annihilation. We could have killed you all, but we chose not to. The The Skarathi surrender was unconditional. Within a month, they had signed treaties, accepted council oversight, and begun the process of integration. Their former commander, humbled and oddly grateful to be alive, became one of humanity's most vocal supporters. They could have destroyed us, it told the council during its formal surrender. Every ship, every life. Instead, they showed mercy. But it was the mercy of a predator that chooses not to kill, not the weakness of prey that cannot. That is true power. In the years that followed, humanity's role as the galaxy's guardians became institutionalized. The Human Defense Initiative established bases in every sector. Military academies run by human instructors trained other species in the arts of war they had forgotten or never learned. The galaxy's monsters had become its shield, but the cost was always evident. Where human ships patrolled, pirates vanished. Not arrested, not tried, vanished. Slave traders found their operations dismantled with surgical precision, their victims freed, and their leaders never seen again. Species that tried to exploit others discovered that humanity had very specific views on predatory behavior. "You've changed us," Krixtar said to Chun during a council recess 5 years after the Devourer War. "The whole galaxy. We were philosophers and artists. Now we're becoming warriors." "No," Chun corrected gently. "You're becoming survivors. There's a difference. Warriors fight because they want to. Survivors fight because they have to. We're teaching you the difference. And if we become like you, if we all become monsters." Chun was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was thoughtful. "You know what the difference between a monster and a guardian is, Ambassador? Choice. A monster destroys because it wants to. A guardian destroys because it must, to protect something worth preserving. As long as you remember why you fight, you'll never become like us. And maybe, just maybe, we'll become a little more like you." The memorial to the Devourer War stood in the center of the council chamber, a testament to the price of survival. It showed the scars in space where reality had been wounded, a reminder of what humanity was capable of. But it also showed the world saved, the species preserved, the future secured. On the 10th anniversary of the war, representatives from every member species gathered for a remembrance ceremony. The Etherians sang songs of sorrow for the violence necessary. The Vorthans displayed their scales in patterns of gratitude. The Calarians brought offerings from the world that had nearly been lost. And the humans? They stood silent guard, watching the ceremony with those predator eyes that never stopped scanning for threats. Because that's what monsters who chose to be guardians did. They watched. They waited. They protected. Ambassador Krixtar stood with them now, wearing the insignia of the Combined Defense Force. He had learned to see the universe through human eyes, to recognize the threats lurking in the dark. He had learned that sometimes mercy meant showing your teeth, that sometimes peace required the willingness to wage war. As the ceremony concluded, a young Vorthan approached the human delegation. Its scales showed the pattern of curiosity mixed with fear that all species displayed around humans. "Are you really monsters?" it asked with the directness of youth. Admiral Thompson knelt to bring herself to the young one's level. "Yes," she said simply. "We are. But we're your monsters. And as long as you need protection, as long as there are threats in the dark, we'll be here. Because that's what monsters who choose to be good do. We stand between you and the other monsters." The young Vorthan considered this, then brightened. "So you're like guardian monsters?" Thompson smiled, and for once it reached her eyes. "That's exactly what we are." As the gathering dispersed, Krixtar reflected on the journey that had brought them here. The galaxy had pleaded for mercy, expecting salvation from enlightened beings. Instead, they had awakened monsters. But perhaps that had been exactly what they needed. Not heroes in shining armor, but creatures of controlled darkness who could match the universe's cruelty with their own. The monsters had answered, and in answering, they had saved them all. The galaxy would never be the same. It was harder now, more aware of the dangers lurking in the void. But it was also safer, protected by the very creatures they had once feared. The peaceful species were learning to bare their teeth when necessary. The violent species were learning to sheath their claws when not. And humanity? Humanity stood watch, the monsters who had chosen to guard rather than devour. They were still everything the galaxy had feared, violent, ruthless, capable of breaking reality itself to win. But they had turned those terrible capabilities outward, becoming the shield against the darkness. In the end, the galaxy had learned a fundamental truth. Sometimes, the only answer to a monster is another monster. But if you're very lucky, if you choose wisely, if you show them respect and trust and maybe even a little compassion, those monsters might just choose to protect you instead. The pleading for mercy had been answered, not with the salvation they expected, but with the guardians they needed. The monsters had come, and they had chosen to be heroes.